Tilapia. I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore-Peace, host and producer of the H3O show. Today we are here at the Art Gallery on the near north side, and we're here for an art exhibit, actually, of a collective of women who call themselves Sapphire and Crystals. We will be interviewing, well, no, we won't be interviewing. We will be allowing the artists to introduce themselves and their work, and we know that you will enjoy the show because we have heard previously that you enjoy our shows when we go to art galleries and do art exhibits. Thank you for watching, and now here's the show.
Our exhibition is called Goddesses, Mentors, and Other Heroes, and we all address that theme. We also have the self-portrait component of our exhibition, which we have been doing for the last several years. It gives us an opportunity to explore our personal identities and where we are at this particular time in our lives. And the individual artists will get a chance to speak to you about their works. We have our member Juarez Hawkins, who's going to give you a little history of Sapphire and Crystals and also introduce the artist to you.
I'm one of the younger members of the group, having joined the organization in 1993. How many people in this room own art by black women? Let's just see. Okay, how many people have a dime in their pocket? Just a little history lesson for you right quick. Anyone who's got a dime in their pocket, pull it out and hold it up. It's a little art quiz that I give my art students all the time. I teach at Perspectives Charter School. And one thing that we run into is that most young people, as well as many people around that you know, don't really know much about the artwork of African American women. Do we have your dimes? Okay, I'll borrow this one. This image on this dime is based on a sculpture by an African American woman named Selma Burke. Okay, she was commissioned to do the bust that they actually used to generate the image for the dime. So anytime you all feel that you need to be inspired by a little bit of African American art, just reach in your pocket and pull out your small change. Okay, so now you own a piece of African American woman's art. Over on this wall, here's another opportunity to own some more art by African American women. All the works on display here, our self-portraits, are available for auction. The minimum bid is $125, so for a few more dimes, you can own another piece of African American history. Our organization was founded in 1987. It was founded by Felicia Grant Preston, who just walked in the door there, and Marva Jolly, the woman in here. Part of the motivation came out of the fact that there aren't a lot of venues and opportunities for African American women to show their work. Hence, there aren't as many opportunities for us to develop our careers, develop our work, and things like that. So Sapphire and Crystals was founded out of that impetus, that need for us to create avenues for ourselves rather than waiting around and hoping that those opportunities might come up for us one day. We create these opportunities for ourselves through shows, events like these, which give you a chance to learn more about us and our work, as well as career development. You could say Sapphire and Crystals is to African American art what Motown was to African American music. It's not only an opportunity for us to strut our stuff, but it's also like a finishing school. Many of us come in not knowing how to exhibit our work properly, not knowing how to deal with galleries or how to document our work. By working in this organization, we have an opportunity for mentorship. So we learn more about the fine art of promoting and producing our fine art, because art's not just what we do in the studio. It's how we present it, it's how we frame it, it's how we document it, because documentation is also important. So much of our work could die with us if we don't take the effort to document it. That's why we produce catalogs for most of our exhibitions, so that there's a record of what we do. Now, some folks may say, well, where did you come up with the name Sapphire and Crystals? So I'm going to lean on a little bit of folklore. Some of you all are old enough to remember the Amos and Andy show and the character Sapphire, who was sort of the sassy, hair-throwing, loud talking. Well, we own all that, okay? But not just the negative connotations as it may apply to us black women just being wild and loud and so on. We also own the daring, the cocky, the outspoken, the unafraid, the jazzy, the fierce, all those positive elements that also made up that Sapphire character. And also, you know, we're precious and we're beautiful. just like jewels. As far as crystals go, we're multifaceted, we're clear, we're direct, transformative, spiritual, firm, beautiful, reflective. All those things encompass who we are. And as far as the multifaceted go, as you can see on this wall, we have a broad range of media, of styles, of ages, of creative directions. We're a broad range of people. We're not just here to sort of present one point of view in terms of artistic creativity and artistic development. We embrace a broad spectrum of points of view, a broad spectrum of media. And that's one of the beautiful things about being in this organization. We get to see a lot of different things. In this show, we have clay artists, we have photographers, watercolor artists, people who draw, people who paint in oil, monoprint artists. We've got a whole range. So what's going to happen now is we're going to adjourn to this room in here. And then I'm going to allow each artist that's present to talk about their work and talk about specifically how their work deals with the theme of goddesses, mentors, and other heroes, which is the theme of this show. So if we take a moment, we can adjourn to this room, and let's get to the meat of the matter. First in our lineup is Faith Davis, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here tonight. Faith works in, I guess you'd say, a medium of jewelry, metal craft, a variety of different types of metal. Faith's work, I talked to her before the show, and she talked about Maasai adornment. The Maasai are a tribe in Africa, and you've seen a lot of their work, a lot of circular beaded neck pieces. And Faith's work, particularly these pieces, are inspired by that. She's also interested in mandala work, so again, it's drawing back to that circular form. She says that introspection is the name of her game. Her work deals with examining issues of the self. Her work tends to be very spiritual, very healing oriented. A number of sapphires around are often wearing work. Are you having Faith on? Yes. Okay. A number of us wear a lot of her jewelry. The earrings by Miss Jolly are also created by Faith Davis. Wish she could be here to talk about it a little bit more in depth, but I gave you the best shot that I could. Okay. Next on the agenda here, we have monoprints by Anna Tyler. This one over here is Celebrations, and if you skip one over, the piece over here is also by Anna Tyler, the blue and the yellow. Fortunately, we have Miss Tyler here, so she can tell us a little bit more about her work and what inspires her.
One of the things that has inspired me greatly really began about 25 years ago. I was doing a series of lectures for the North Shore Junior League on African American art and artists, and of course, whereas I used that bust of a Roosevelt dime to give them an example of the black art they were carrying in their pockets. So I was very proud when you did that. But the thing, at the time that I became involved in this project, I was asked by these women, and I had never done that before. It's just that I knew all these different artists. I knew about their work. But when they offered me a paying job, I said yes. Well, then I had to really sort of educate myself as to what the professional writers and people that were critiquing their work was saying about them. So I stumbled upon a book by Alpha Moon and Fine on Afro-American art. And in that, as I perused its pages, I discovered Richard Mayhew. Richard Mayhew gave me permission to really be myself. He is a colorist. I love color. And I love juxtaposing various hues, one against the other. I love the landscape. I grew up appreciating the landscape because I used to travel with my parents back to South Carolina, their hometown. And we spent a lot of time in the country. So I could never get that out of my system. So with his permission, I embarked on creating landscape pieces. Now this particular one I call Thursday because it captures a mood of a summer Thursday in Hollywood. And in the foreground is the vegetation that I was often experienced as a kid in South Carolina. On the other hand, this piece is called Celebration. and it was generated by a friend of mine who is a Japanese American, and this piece really captures to me more or less the, you know, the gray. There's a lot of symbolism here in the color, the gray muted tones, the browns, the round balls that could symbolize balloons, the touch of red that brings about joy, which came about when they were released, but they were still in a state of not really knowing whether they had a real future.
Next on our lineup, I'd like to have Chevette come up and talk about her work, Chevette Williams. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Chevette now probably since our show at Satori Gallery in 1995. She's one of the jazziest women that I know. She has a history as a runway model, international traveler, and just all around bon vivant. She has very fascinating range of work. There's a painting over here with the feathers, that's hers right here, as well as a ceramic piece over here, and there's a ceramic and stone piece over here. So I'm going to open the floor up to Chevette and let her talk about her work.
Oh. Mentors, I think in terms of music I listen to, Shirley Scott, Shirley Horn. I think about Edie Paul, an educator that I know, who once said to me, if they don't understand your silences, they will never understand your words. And so much of what I do, especially with my clay and my oils, I'm alone and I'm listening to my inner voices. This particular piece here has come through my feelings about birth and regeneration. It's the egg, it's the life. In order to create life, you must destroy a life. You must destroy a world. I put quartz crystals in the eyes so that they're reflective quality, they're not dark, there's light. They follow you around. It makes you think of your inner self. The particular piece here came about, it reminds me actually of an anthurium. Oftentimes when I'm working in clay, I'm thinking in terms of movement and texture and line. The terracotta piece is a piece that I was privileged to manipulate its earth. I was privileged to manipulate it. The limestone, however, is earth-made. It's just a piece that I happened to find, and it had a particular movement. The stamen here is the heart of a conch shell that a friend of mine, Gary Jones, brought me back from Cancun. And for the longest, I did not want to put it there. I was actually wanted to create a piece in terracotta, glaze it white, and put it there. But the story here, it's about life. It's about the living stone, the terracotta that I was privileged to form. And really not solely by myself, because if any of you work in clay, the one thing you understand about it is that you form it, and then you give it to the fire. And you have no idea what comes out until the kiln is cool. So, and here, this was life. I mean, many over a long period of time, not only for it to deteriorate, but just the creatures, the sea creatures that went about to make this form. So this creates life to me. It came together as over about a 4 or 5 year period. The limestone was laying in one part of the studio. The the terracotta actually was a discard because the fire was not so kind to it. When it was fired, it was cracked in the bottom. There was a hole in the bottom. And it was in another part of the studio. And one day I came in one of those particularly inspired states, and I saw the 3 pieces together. I looked around the studio, and after a 4 or 5 year period, they were born. And just, I almost got rid of this piece, except for the fact that I said, I like this shape. I want to hold on to it. And a piece was born. Very similar to the painting on the wall, because I sculpt and I paint. Maybe some of you are familiar with Joseph Holmes. He inspired me. Some of the works that he was able to create, some of the movement that he was able to create with his dancers were just incredible. He and his friend both were friends of mine, and I was privileged to be a part of their lives before their death. This is called Desert Dance. The painting took place in 3 stages. First, the gray head that's reaching to the heavens. As the neck went down, I realized in the brushstroke that they looked like legs to me. And so from another painting, the blue heads came from another totally unrelated piece of work. And at one point, I saw them together. This piece lay dormant for about 6 years, until one day I walked into the studio, and it was the way that it was lying. I said, feathers. And they were upstairs. I went to my home, I got the feathers, I came down, and it was completed. And it's Desert Dance. It takes some time. And oftentimes, as I've said to Juarez, that we are all more than we appear to be, and sometimes more than we even allow ourselves to be. And oftentimes in my work, I bring that about, that we, well, works that are most certainly not here, but works that where we push the envelope. I always attempt to push the envelope, push it into surrealism. Dali, you know, was an inspiration to me, because in his particular works, he could paint 3 paintings on one canvas. It depended upon where you stood, what you would perhaps see in his particular works. I tried to bring that about in mind and bringing about a spiritual state. And speaking of a spiritual state, I'm always attempting to push the envelope. Thank you.
I look at Artie as sort of the soul sister of the bunch. She sort of, to me, exemplifies some of the values, the Black is beautiful, the Black consciousness movement, and she still sort of carries it forward still into this new millennium. So I present Arlene Turner Crawford to give us a minute.
I guess that would be what I am a lot, because part of my interest or my purpose was fused with the Black arts movement. I was in college majoring in art, and for a minute I was like, well, what good is this going to do anybody? Because it's art, and it's on the, you know, it's on the edges, it's an aesthetic, and it's in a realm, I was just struggling with why art, and I was basically enlightened or kind of turned on to it by being exposed to an artist who came to teach at Northern, Nelson Stevens. He was a part of a collective of artists called Afro Cobra that Jeff Donaldson, who's kind of disappeared, was one of the founders of. And within that, being a child of the 60s, I began to read and study. And because I was interested in art and I felt that there was a purpose in my life and in what we could do as a people, I kind of became or dreamed about being a vanguard, someone who would put forward and communicate in painting or in the field what they believed about our people, our culture, our connections to one another, our connections to our ancestors and to our future. This piece is actually a portrait of Larry Neal. Larry Neal was a writer and poet who passed away January 5th, 1981. He was best friends with Nelson Stevens and wrote a book, co-authored an anthology called Black Fire with Amira Baraka. I met Larry Neal, I hung out with him from time to time because of Nelson and some of the other people I was put in contact with in that time. He loved music, he was into jazz. The piece kind of represents some of the forms and ideas of mentors of mine, the Afro-Cobra artists who talked about and developed in the Black aesthetic, shine and reflection and energy in their work, music, rhythm, frontality of the image and form. And impressions of the drum is like, drum is historically our mode of communication. That beat, that was something spiritually as well as physically our people used to communicate with one another, and so that's how this piece grew into being a statement that combined, I hope, a lot of elements that spoke to his meaning to me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. You did fine. Next is Felicia Grant Preston. Felicia is a painter, draftswoman, printmaker, teacher, all around, just artist, creative type. And Felicia and I have a lot in common in the sense that we both work across a wide range of media. She's often referred to herself as having a split personality. In fact, in this particular show, she's got a variety of different media going up. And I'll let her talk about how this sort of diverse group of pieces relate to the theme of the show.
You know, I had to chuckle because it's very interesting that Juarez would mention my split personality, because as I was standing here thinking, that's very much what I was going to introduce and say in terms of my work. Because often, I jokingly do say it's my split personality, because the experiences that come through my work come from different types of experiences. Like, for instance, works like this come from an external experience, and works like the one over on the wall, Sister Goddess Walking Through the Fire, come from a very internal experience, but both very spiritually touched. Even though you may look at the work and see that it seems very different, there's a lot of commonality in the work. For one, it is the spirit. Here, this is after Maya Angelou, and comes from my love of her work and my love of her particular piece, And Still I Rise. So the images are images of African American people who, of course, we owe a lot to, because they are the wings for which we fly. They are the ones that we have taken our flight from and help us and have helped us to rise. Also, the hands are reminiscent of Charles White, who is definitely inspiration for me. The dove, of course, is just actually came about because of the recent experiences. I was so touched as a person, as an artist, as a spirit, from the events, the tragedies that occurred on September 11th. And that is what went back into both of those pieces of work. The dove came after, you know, listening to the news programs and feeling my pain and asking questions about, you know, God, what is this all about? How do we respond to this? And one night, as I was finishing the images, all of a sudden I looked back and there was, you know, I often have I'm listening to programs in my studio on the TV, and I'm working and I'm listening, and of course all of the events of the news are on, and all of a sudden I look back at the work and I saw the dove. It's like, oh, I know what needs to go here. This is the final part to this piece of work, because I thought it was finished. But as I looked in anguish at the TV and turned back around and looked at the work, the image of the dove came to my mind, and it then became the finish of the piece. The Sister Goddess over there was a part of the same thing, a part of the same experience. I work a lot, the external experience of combining colors is something, like I said, is an internal experience. I never know what it's going to become. I may get a sense of what colors I'm feeling through a certain period of time, but never know what combination or how the colors are going to see themselves. And there again, I'm listening to the programs and experiencing all of this fear and turmoil due to those events. And I look into this piece, which was really colors. You know, there's paper, it's mixed media, there's paper, there's acrylic paint, there's watercolor, and all of a sudden I see this woman. And so I take my charcoal pencil and I begin to bring out the details of this Sister Goddess I'm seeing in this piece. And as I watch her, I'm not sure what she's going to become. I see she has something in her hand. She's looking up. I'm thinking about these people and all of these spirits that left the earth at the same time. And remember reading about a very spiritual book, and it talked about people moving into the next life, and that confusion, this experience of confusion of not recognizing one is no longer in the body anymore, and trying to find the light and trying to decide where is it I go from here. And so I think about this sister goddess who is present in those buildings at that time, and she is guiding these people to this light, guiding these people to the next life. My sister goddess. Thank you.
My work is next in the lineup. I'll talk briefly about mine. I'm Juarez Hawkins, for folks who came in a little bit late. And this is my work here. The first one is based on Frida Kahlo. It's an image of Frida Kahlo, well-known Mexican surrealist painter. And I chose her sort of as a mentor. I've been fascinated by her and her work for a long time. And part of my fascination lies in the fact that even though she was severely disabled, she managed to be able to work, to get up and paint. And as an artist, I can find 50 million excuses to not paint. So I can look back at her and say, well, here's somebody who could barely walk or barely move half the time, but was able to work even from her bed. She had an easel mounted over her bed. So if she could manage to get up and manage to make some creative effort, surely I can, since I'm healthy and I move and I work. Also, what I'm also intrigued by in her work is her honesty. Anyone who has seen her work knows that she's a sister that doesn't pull any punches. We could almost make her an honorary Sapphire and Crystals, because her work was very honest, very direct, very much to the point, and she really just didn't sugarcoat anything that she was dealing with in her work. So I wanted to start by doing a portrait of her. The reason it's on silk, originally it was going to be on wood, and I was challenged by one of my fellow sapphires, Rose Bluin, to create a piece that actually soared to the heavens as compared to a piece that was rooted in the earth. And since I had been painting on fabric for a little while anyway, I decided to take her up on that. So now I'm moving into the whole idea of work that sort of has a more ephemeral, transparent quality. So more work that you see coming out of me is going to move in that direction. So thank you, Rose. Behind it, I'll just sort of shift Frida, excuse me, Frida, is a work that I did. This, folks who know me know I do quite a bit of self-portrait work. And this was a piece that I did on 9/11 as well. It was just really kind of a day in the life. A lot of the self-portrait work I'm doing now is also tied in very closely with my journal work. I paint, then I write. And so this was basically, you could say, a piece sort of torn out of a journal, dealing with my own just personal disorientation and trying to make sense out of all that was going on. There's text on the back of the piece, and for those who are interested in what it says, in our book in the back there, I do have the text that contains what's on the back of this piece. So for the most part, it was just, I'm a woman in shock, sort of like Kandinsky when his world was just really shifted by acts of war and how it shifted his world. My world's been changed too, so this is just really a day in my life that, you know, will never really quite be the same. And so I did that. I present that too in the spirit of Frida, and again as someone who's just very honest and very direct and very true to her own vision. So that's me. Next on our lineup is Shirley Sullivan.
Hello. Again, my name is Shirley Sullivan, and I'd like to tell you how I came about painting these two particular paintings. Most of my work is in acrylic medium, some oil, but mostly acrylic because it's fast and I like to paint, put it under my arm and walk out the door with it. This particular painting is titled Spiritual Family Reunion, and I have to tell you something about the people in this painting. The spirit on this side is my mother. She was my mentor, my everything. She passed recently. She was 4'11", very powerful. To me, she was like 6'12". I was her personal project because I was an only child, so you know I got the business. She was fabulous. On this side, this is my aunt Fan Chonor, her sister, who was a wonderful aunt. She had lots of children, and I would go there as a child and play with them because I had no one else to play with. And she was just fabulous. And this is October. I always think of her in October because she would always have these Halloween parties, and all the kids in the neighborhood, her sister's children would all come there, and there would just be hundreds of kids. There would be food and just everything going on. And it was only much later on that I found out that these parties were really her birthday. She was born on Halloween. I never knew that. I never saw I never heard happy birthday sung to her. I never saw birthday cards. There were cakes, but they weren't it was Halloween. So I was always shocked to find out that these parties were her birthday. But it was for the children. Everyone loved her. The center figure is my Uncle Maynard. He was wonderful, sort of a grandpa uncle figure. Spent a lot of time with me because, again, I was an only child. So these three sisters and brothers have all passed, all within 2 years of each other. My mother passed recently. This sister passed 2 years ahead of her, and the brother 2 years ahead of that one. So the other sisters and brothers are a little edgy in through here, you can imagine. The next, I hope that they're happy and on a much positive, in a more positive spiritual plane. This painting is titled Sisters, S-I-S-T-A-S, Sisters. As I said earlier, I was an only child. I never had sisters or brothers. I didn't know what it was to relate to a sister. And for a long time, it was great because I got everything. It was wonderful. I didn't have to share with anything. Of course, in later life, I had to learn to share. But I never had sisters. So in my paintings, many times, these groups of women appear. Sometimes they're in the background, sometimes they're the main theme, but they're always groups of women. Usually they're 3 or 4. There might be a portrait, but there are always these sisters somewhere. So it's like I've created my own sisterhood. And it's my way of psychologically dealing with it. Because as I grew older, I realized, even though I had all these other things, I didn't have a sister, or sisters, and I had missed something. Sisters are a little different from just regular friends, I found out. So this painting is about sisterhood, and one terrific thing about being in Sapphire and Crystals, I now have a large group of sisters, the Sapphire and Crystal sisters. So I'm very happy and pleased about that. So I'm not alone anymore.
Next is Dorothy Carter. And Dorothy has very interesting, enigmatic work. So I'm glad that she's here tonight to sort of give you the straight. Yeah, well, to me. Does that mean spooky? No. It's like an enigma. It's puzzling. It's deep.
Well, the straight dope is I'm just trying to make pretty things. It's not deep at all. It's not enigmatic. And I do it while I'm talking to my girlfriends on the phone, gossiping about who's getting fired at work. So it's not deep at all. I'm naturally deep, so if I try to be deep, so I have to try to be light. If I try to be light, then I'll be halfway over there. No, it's not deep. But I would like to thank the Sapphire and Crystals ladies for inviting me to be in the show. This is the first painting I've done in 10 years. And I wouldn't have done it if Anna, Tyler, Joyce Anderson, and Shirley Sullivan hadn't encouraged me to be in this show. And I'm eternally grateful to them because they didn't have to do that.
I had the fortune of meeting Renee. Both of us started with Sapphire and Crystals in 1993. So we were both sort of like the baby sapphires, and we started exhibiting together. It was really kind of fascinating. At that point, by 1993, I had been exhibiting for about 3 years. Renee, on the other hand, is an attorney. And this was her first exhibit, her first foray into art at all. She had known that she had had it in her for years and years, and then it was like in 1993, she suddenly decided to have the courage to just bring it out of her. And so I've had the pleasure of watching her work evolve over the years, and all I can say with each passing year, that the sister's just fierce. Just fierce. She works in handmade, hand-cast paper, and recently her work has taken on the form of angels. She tells me that some of this has come about. She lost her mother recently, and so now she's kind of touching into the spirit of her mother, the spirit of her ancestors by extension, hence the angels, like the angels watching over her. A lot of the inscriptions in her work come out of biblical scripture. So most of what you see here, like there, let's see, there are, in the end, three things that last: faith, hope, and love. So a lot of her work always has some sort of inspirational inscription, and over the years it's just become more and more colorful, more and more powerful, and I think it's sort of an encouragement for those of you who've been like dying to play in the mud or get your finger paints out or pull those crayons out. Renee is really kind of a living example of what can happen if you choose to really follow your creative impulses. Don't let them lie dormant. Honor them in some way. And she's just a good example for all of us. So thanks, Renee, wherever you are, for giving us all this beauty.
For this particular exhibition, the theme is goddesses, mentors, and other heroes. So I agonized for quite a while. Who was I going to paint? What was I going to do? I work in 3 dimensions as well as 2 dimensions. Also, a lot of us have a lot of flexibility in terms of our creativity. And I agonized. I was thinking about doing a painting of my mother, my great-grand-aunts. I was looking at Margaret Burroughs. I was looking at Black Venuses. I was thinking and thinking and thinking. But I was also reading a book about slavery and stories of slaves, and I was also reading a book about the secret codes in African American quilts, the encoded messages that slaves presented to escape to the Underground Railroad and escape from the plantations. It's a fascinating book if you haven't read it, and it's just amazing. So I sort of incorporated the 2 things. I was in the book about the slave stories. There were pictures of these people who had survived slavery, and I'm telling you, it was just amazing to see them standing on their feet. I mean, I just could, you can't even think. And I started this months ago. So when we had the World Trade Center and Pentagon occurrences, I was already involved in painting these, but I ended up entitling them American Heroes 1 and 2, Slavery Survivors, because even though I know this is a horrific event, we all know it's a horrific event, there were generations of people who lived horrific lives. And so when I saw these individual black and white photographs of these survivors, and they're standing there, and their backs are straight, and they look human. I had to try to paint them, and I almost want to take these back and work more. The women, I'm really. I felt that. I mean, we all talk about how spirits and all that kind of thing, and I did really feel a relationship to them, and that's why I decided to paint them. And the little squigglies and circles and triangles are taken from the quilts. Sometimes there were actually maps sewn onto the quilts because slaves didn't know anything but the plantation. They never left. They were born. Many of them were born on the plantations and died on the plantations. But those who wanted to escape had to know how to go. And so somehow outsiders got them the information. They made maps. They would show you which direction you should go in. If you should go north, there would be a configuration with brighter materials or more emphatic materials that would point north. If you're supposed to go west, all this information is on these quilts. And sometimes the quilts even look confused, and people assumed that it was sloppy handiwork, but it wasn't. It was every single thing was a message, and we can document it by looking at. I don't want to talk so long, so I'm going to stop in a second. But we can document it. It relates to secret societies in Africa that existed in Africa. Some of the same symbology was found in there, and we see the Eastern Star. Yeah, you have to read the book. Okay, read the book. One thing I wanted to say, and I'll really shut up, but I just have to read this one thing. Even though your stomach be full, and does you have plenty clothes, that bullwhip on your back hide make you forget the good part. There weren't any happy slaves. And so that's what my paintings are about.
We're finally back around to Rose Bluin, very spiritual sister who I've sort of dubbed as our resident shaman. And she's done the photographic pieces here and on the opposite wall, the Stairway to Heaven.
I'm Rose. I've been taking pictures for about 20 years now, and I was sort of awed when I realized that recently. One of the experiences I had that made me literally walk back through my entire career, history, adventure as a photographer was that in a big rain a couple of months ago, my basement got flooded, and the vast majority of my work got wet and damaged. And I spent a month trying to save over 14,000 negatives, and we didn't even count the prints that got wet. And I was out of town when it happened, and I walked into my front door, and all over the floor were these rows and rows and rows of photographs in the living room, in the dining room, all over the kitchen, all over the den, and as I found out later, all over my room. And nobody was home. And I couldn't imagine what's gone on here, what's the deal. And I kind of delicately made my way back to the kitchen, and there's a message on the machine, my daughter informing me, oh, it flooded today and your pictures got wet, so we spread them out to dry. And they had also spread out most of the negatives. And it was so touching to me that my children decided that the thing we've got to save is the photography, Mom's work. Of course, they didn't look at the black and white work, which was stored in my dark room, and that's what took me a month to dry out. Anyway, I spent that month literally having to walk through every single picture that I have taken over the last 20 years, and I have to tell you that it was just an extraordinary experience for me. But it's one that really gave me an entirely new appreciation for photography and this work that I do. One of the works that I do, I also teach in the English department at Columbia College. So I teach things like literature and writing, and photography is something that I've always done. I'm a self-taught photographer and got started just because I like to take pictures and I like to develop and share the way I see the world. I spent 20 years taking black and white photography, mostly documentary and fine art. I love to capture people in the settings that they're in, interacting in the way that they do, and I've always felt there's something so special about the way individuals connect both with each other and with the environments that they're in. So is the documentary part. The fine art part was where I tried to explore some deeper vision. And in black and white photography, it had to do with capturing the essence of something. When you eliminate color almost as a distraction, you get down to essences. And recently, I've been inspired to actually explore the essences within color photography. And in moving to color, it's been challenging. It's like a whole different language for me. But I'm continuing something that I started with black and white, which is merging images. And this piece is a double exposure. It's called Fountain Flowers. And I had gotten into making water fountains. And I had one sitting in a room, and the late afternoon sun came in and went all the way across the room and just fell on the water. And it was so lovely. I jumped up and ran and got my camera, and I took a picture of the fountain, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be nice to kind of combine that with flowers? And I did, and it came out. And one of the things about doing double exposures is you never really know what you're going to get. So I'm always delighted and surprised when what I get is something that resonates in my heart as something lovely and a vision. The elements here, water fountains. Water is a symbol for the emotions. It's also a symbol for spirit. Flowers are just wonderful, and since my name is Rose, I really identify with flowers and essences of flowers. And thank you, Etta. And I'll just comment quickly on the other piece. I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, visiting a friend who went to work that day, so I was kind of left at home to mind her dog and the apartment. But late in the afternoon, I took my camera and just went walking down the street, which is one of the things I like to do because there's a time of late afternoon or evening when the sun, there's just a glow. Photographers have always called that magic time, and you'll often see photographers running and grabbing cameras to go out and take pictures right at that time of day. But what I have been impressed about recently is the quality of that light, and that light is God. And not only do I see it, but I feel it. And so it is literally an experience of walking in heaven on earth, to walk late in the day when that light is present on the earth. As I tried to think of a title for this piece, and Gloria asked me, Stairway to Heaven, why did you call it that? You know, all of the artists can tell you when it comes to what am I going to name this piece of art, you know, it really, sometimes it's immediate, sometimes you just got to sit with it until it comes. But as I looked at it, just Stairway to Heaven came. So I accepted it. And then after I accepted it, I said, okay, what makes it a stairway to heaven? How does that even make any sense? But for me, it makes sense because heaven is associated with up, and this stairway goes up, and there's all this wonderful, incredible light.
I thought it was because you were a fan of Jimi Hendrix.
There's all this incredible, glowing, wonderful light that I associate with God. But the stairway isn't, I mean, you have the shadow of this tree, and in my own journey of spiritual growth and development and healing, I've very much had to look at my own shadow selves and heal them and come to know them and to accept their gifts. And so the stairway to heaven, you do have to walk through shadows to get there. And I'll probably think in more detail about this image and exactly why it represents Stairway to Heaven. But at least so far, it reveals my own journey and having to go almost trudge sometimes up and up and up and up and walking through those shadows and ultimately getting to the illumination that's revealed. So thank you.
She did the clay pieces here as well as the clay and glass piece outside. So,
you know, it's never easy to really share with people why you do this stuff, because sometimes you don't even know. But let me just give you some, I'm a country woman. I was born in Mississippi picking and chopping cotton. And one of the observations I made real early was that women were smarter than men in terms of figuring in my neighborhood. My mother was smarter than my father, but she let my father lead, if you understand. And my mother was a quilter. I believe that. I mean, you know, and that's also part of Sapphire and Crystals, that we must exercise our own energy, take our own risks, and teach each other. And this one's called, I am not a religious person at all, nor did I grow up in a religious home. I grew up in a very spiritual home. But we caught a lot of flack for being a non-religious family. You know, them people don't even go to church. And I'm surrounded by a lot of people who do. And I'm fascinated by them, you know, because I see one of the things that I'm about, my work is about women and women's voices. And it's in the long haul about black people. You know, the people who grew me up put S's on words that shouldn't be, mispronounced words, but they wanted me to be somebody. They wanted me to grow up to do some things. And it started as mud pies. I was obsessed with mud pies as a little girl. My mother is very pleased. And this is non-traditional for me. Those of you who know my work know that I basically work with vessels. And one is called Strumming for God. And that's what I call my friends who go to church a lot, you know. And that's Saving My Soul. And the other one's called On Top of the World. Because I really do think that we're responsible for our own happiness, our own accomplishments, and that there is always someone on top of the world that you can use as an example of how you climb the stairs. You know, and that's what Sapphire and Crystals is about. We didn't start out knowing how to put together shows. I mean, me and Felicia sat in my kitchen. I can't tell you all that we were doing, but one of the things we were doing is talking about black women and art, you know, and it has grown into this marvelous group of women who are able to work hard. That's what we do. We work hard, and we try to believe in each other and support each other and learn from each other. And that's what it is. The one last thing I want to say about I get visited by a lot of spirits. Just like the slave women, this illusion about people being happy, you know, it boggles the imagination, actually. And I teach at Chicago State, so I tell them I bring them all to college. You know, think about the number of people who wanted to go to college who couldn't, who wanted to be educated. So in my art, as I work on campus on art, it's their voices that's coming through me. You know, if I'm in my own studio at home, then that's another set of folks. So I'm always dealing with all these different voices and not ashamed nor afraid of them. And I think that's what's so special about African American women's art. So we welcome you. Thank you.
I have a lot of different types of pieces, so I'm not sure where to start, but I would like to maybe mention the donation show. And then this is more of my personal work. And of course, this was going on before the tragedy happened on September the 11th. And as soon as that happened, I had strong feelings towards it. And I'm not very good with words, so I had to get some images down. And I figured if anything that I would do, I would like to donate the proceeds to the cause. So it just happened a few weeks ago, so I didn't have time to do quite a few things. So I just did a few images, and I wanted to make a statement without showing any bodies or anything too tragic. So it's somewhat abstract, but if you kind of read into the title or into the images, you can get an idea of maybe what I'm trying to say. This is more personal work over here. This has been going on for several months now as I've been getting ready for the show. And I like to deal with themes of feelings that people have, especially what they have towards each other. I like to deal with opposites like male and female, dealing with not so much realistic images. I've been slowly getting away from that, and it's been kind of a natural transition more into the abstract realm. So I deal with things that represent female and represent male, and I like to deal with opposite complementary colors like green and red and orange and blue. I like contrast, light and dark, natural shapes versus geometric shapes.